Jimmy Costas, how are you doing? My man, I'm all over the place. I don't know if I'm coming or going. I'm in a completely, honestly, I thought I was good to go. And then nothing worked. Computer doesn't work. So now I'm on the iPad. I'm like stuck into a corner on my desk. I don't know what's going on. This thing's up and down on my table. I don't know if you can see me or not. I'm doing one of these to see if I'm in the center of the screen. I don't know what's going on, Jimmy. This is what it's like. What even is this, Jimmy? This is ridiculous. It's a Sunday. I don't know what we're doing. This isn't Saturday, right? My shirt's all wrinkled. I don't know what that's about. This is a disaster. And we haven't even said anything yet. Jimmy, understand this. This show is going to be a disaster. Let's just talk about it right now. Maybe the conversation is about what happens when it all goes wrong. Because that's where we're at right now, Jimmy. Nothing's working for me here. I'm screaming in my office. Someone's probably gonna come yelling and screaming down. I'm sure they're here, right? We had graduation yesterday. There's probably still kids here in the lock-in. I don't know. They're probably hearing me yell. That's what's going on. So maybe today we should talk about what happens when it just all goes wrong. Because that's essentially what's happening right now. How are you? Good. That was fun. All right, so here's what we're going to talk about today. I think what we really got to get into, and you look like you just got done working out. Did you just work out? No, you didn't. Good, that's fantastic. That makes me feel better. This is the best conversation we've had since this show has started. I'm feeling very good about it right now. I feel like I'm valued. I feel like I'm heard. I feel like this is what the people want, Jimmy. This is what people want, Jimmy. They just want you there just sitting there and let me go, go, go. Because I got lots to say. I don't know if you know that about me or not. I got lots to say. So there it is. How are you? This has been fun. All right, so here's what we want you guys. So leadership challenge for next week is simply this. All right, see this?
You know what I'm thinking right now is that my daughter is visiting me and she's in the room next door, and I'm going to wait for her to walk out and go, who the hell is talking?
She knows. We've been out to dinner. She knows that this is what it is. She called me Joe. Then she called Jeff Zoll Dr. Zoll. So here's the thing. We're in fight. Like, that's just what this is. Let's be honest about that.
Oh, my goodness.
I'll tell her right now. Wake up. It's time to get going. Start your day.
Joe, did you work out this morning? You look like you went for a run this morning.
Why would you ask me dumb questions? You know how I feel about exercise. If I'm not being chased, I'm not running. And if we're running together, Jimmy, I'll tell you right now, if we're both being chased, I'll trip you. I will. I'll trip you, and then I'll run the other way so then I can walk for a little bit. Okay? So let's be honest about me working out.
You know, I was picturing you running away with your little leg just going.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. Right after I trip you. I'll tell you that right now. So, all right. So I was walking to school today. So to be honest, let's talk about like something for real. So I was walking to school today, and I did my walk to work video this morning instead of yesterday, because yesterday we were all crazy with all kinds of stuff going on. But what I talked about was really interesting to me because yesterday my son Aiden graduated from college at UW.
I saw that. Yeah, congratulations.
Congratulations on that. Yeah, let's one less check right. Here's the thing. So we were so he was walking. He did graduation yesterday. Here's the really cool thing. So these kids are kids. These men and women now are walking into graduation. Huge venue, the whole thing. Everything's just they're walking in, and they're walking in and they're looking around, right? They're looking around. They're looking for people in their family. And it was cool because what I talked about this morning on the walk was it takes you back, right? Because think about it. When they started their school career, in kindergarten, every kindergarten concert's the same, man. Every single one of them. They get up on stage and they start looking. They just start looking for people, right? And when they see their people, they start to wave at their people. And then their people wave at them, and then they're happier, right? Because they were there for them. And so here are these kids, these men and women on the other side of this journey, and they're doing the same thing. They just want people to be there for them. And what I said this morning was the last 3 weeks of school are a tough situation, right? But at the same time, what these kids are going to remember are the connections that you have with them, not the content that you teach them. And that might be a really unpopular decision or unpopular opinion, but the first 3 weeks and the last 3 weeks are so much less about content and so much more about connections. And I think they're, regardless of when the last 3 weeks of school are, like you can have them in May, you can have them in June, you could have them in July, it doesn't matter. The last 3 weeks are about making sure that when they walk out, they know they had a great experience throughout the course of the year. And I think what I'd like to talk about today is how do we as leaders set up the environment to make sure that we can make those connections happen towards the end of the year. And the expectation is more about the connection than it is about the content being taught, because I think that's where people get messed up. They think they got to get all this stuff in before the kids leave, and they don't. They have to make the connections before the kids. I believe they have to make the connections before the kids leave, and that's just me. So when we think about what are we doing as leaders in that space to set it up so they can make those connections at the beginning and end of the year, I think we have to be really cognizant of the expectation that we give to the people that we lead, that that's what we want, versus get everything in and make sure that every piece of material is taught, every piece of material is to them, so they have all the content that they need before they move on to the next thing. And I don't know, those were my thoughts this morning, but it really triggered me this morning when I was thinking about, graduation yesterday. We had graduation here yesterday. Same thing happened. When kids walked in, they looked for their people. So be there for them was really, I think, the message that I sent to everybody this morning. Was, being there and being present, and not just being there physically, but being there emotionally, being there mentally in a time where things get really knocked down, really, and, a lot of stress. Just being there in that moment is important for them. So,
Joe, I was going to ask you something. Do you mind today if I just interview you?
Yeah,
I'll
you
ask
certainly
questions, you respond. No, seriously, because I was thinking about something. So as you were just talking there, I was even thinking about what you left in the Voxer thread the other day. I wanted to talk about that, but I don't want to catch you off guard either. I'm not trying to take you down.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, you don't want to go down, but
I do this thing called I do this thing called the interview chair. So this would be like that. It could be like the interview chair. Like this is, I'm sure you're probably going to use that for your content too. So whatever. I mean, it's fine. But you do what you. Anyway, I'm kidding. Go ahead. Ask me questions. We're
gonna test the new thing. The interview chair will eventually become me interviewing somebody else in the interview chair. So, okay, we'll try it. Let's just try it. All right.
Go ahead.
Well, before I jump in there, let me just share a couple things that you just shared. As you were talking about graduation, I was even thinking just about this whole idea that when, obviously as a high school principal, all these graduations I sat through, one of the things that I tried to do was always try to be really intentional in inviting teachers and administrators from all the grade levels. You're a little bit different situation, obviously, with a smaller district, but I think in larger districts, sometimes I would say to our leaders to be really intentional to reach out. If you're in a district with multiple schools, I always try to remind them that the kid who's graduating didn't graduate because of what our teachers and staff did from grades 9 through 12, but it started way back in pre-K or K, right? Or maybe even earlier in some places, but just to be really cognizant of that. So that's one thing that kind of comes to mind, because to me, it is about a celebration for the community. And that's one thing I try to always emphasize to the kids is that, yes, this day is for you because you're graduating and we're proud of you. And it's quite an accomplishment. You've achieved a goal, but it's also for all the people in the community who supported you throughout that journey, right? So it's a celebration for everybody. So that's one thing. And when you were talking, all I kept going back to about the connections was trust. How do we build trust? When I think about that, I think, who in my life do I trust? And when I think about that, I think, well, people who are dependable, right? People that are there for me no matter what, right? You call them, they're there. They give you their time. If you call them and said, I need you, they'd say, seriously, if I need to come to you, I'll come right now, right? Those types of things. People that don't judge you, people that forgive you. And it's this constant. So I think one of the ways we can think about trust connections is how are we developing that trust from others in our school communities? And what does that look like? right? And to me, it's, do what you say you're going to do, right? If you say you're going to do something, do it. And if someone gives you something in confidence, do not betray that confidence, right? If you say you're not going to do something, then don't do it, right? And so I try to just break that down as I think through it, right? So what are we doing in our actions on a daily basis? Because to me, that is all about connections. One thing that I also, because this is just what I believe, is what am I doing for myself personally to develop my own connections? In other words, should I always wait for other people to make me feel connected and welcomed and a part of it? Or should I do something initially also, because I'm also responsible for that connection?
Yeah.
And so the reason I say that, Joe, is because you were talking the box the other day. And as you think about the connections, I think about the emotion of those connections. And when you started talking, it took me back, because I remember doing almost the exact same thing you did, right? And I'm going to share something with you. And I don't know if people agree with me, but this is the whole idea of, what do you do when you come towards your last days of retirement, of leaving a school district that you feel like you've given everything to that school district, or a place that's made you feel like it's home, or they made you feel valued or appreciated or loved? And because those emotions are real in what we do, right? And so the reason I say that, Joe, is because I'm making the analogy of how kids are going to feel when they're at graduation and they're leaving, right? Because that a lot of them are like lost, because they're like, I have no idea what the hell I'm going to do after graduation. This is the only place I've ever known, right?
Right.
And those emotions are real. And you will have seniors behaving in ways you're like, what is this behavior coming from? Like, all these years you've been like amazing, and all of a sudden now in the last 3 months you're just kind of acting weird. And I always thought it's because that's their part where there's trepidation, anxiety, they're scared. They don't know what the next stage is going to. And again, I'm talking about some kids, I'm not talking about all kids, but for some kids that emotion is real. Well, just like you, when I left, like, I don't want this big to do, or this all everybody coming. I just want to leave and go, right? Like, but I wonder if it's because I was worried how I would react to that. And so what I didn't realize in the moment is me trying to avoid that is not about me. That's what they need to bring closure to somebody like Joe Sanfilippo, that's all they've ever known. You hired them, supported them, they love you, and now you're just going to walk away and not let them honor you and celebrate you, because it's weird for us, because we don't want to make it about us, but it's not about us. It's for them. Just like that graduation, it's for the kid, but it's also for the community who needs that, to say, hey, look, when we give all this time, look at the product that we produce. And now you give us hope, kids. You give us hope that everything we do, we've seen it, and now you can go, right? Well, it's the same thing for you, right? And it was for me too. So my point is, I went in on a Sunday, cleared out my office, walked around my school literally for an hour. Went down every hallway, went to the places that I spent the most time. And then I turned off all the lights, went back to my office, literally just sat in my chair and literally just reflected. I can still remember it. I just cried. Because it's 14 years, right, in a building. That's all you know. And so I remember I went to at the door, I turned off the light, I turned around, I looked one more time at my desk, my office, took a picture of it, and walked out. And literally 3 months later, my assistant principal called me, and she said, hey, well, I don't remember where I was at the time. I was on the road somewhere, and she said, hey, I need to talk to you. I said, what's going on? And she said, hey, there's just a lot of people here who miss you. And they feel like they never got the closure that they needed. I know what you always say. You just want to walk away. You don't want this big to-do thing. But, Jimmy, the people need that. So, anyway, that's my message to you. Sorry.
This is for everybody listening and not knowing what's going on. What Jimmy just said is exactly what I want to do. So, essentially, he's scolding me right now in front of everybody. So that worked out. This is going really well for me. And
that's because I love you, buddy. That's because I love you. And I just want you to reflect. I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm saying that your people need that. So
Yeah.
just remember that. That's what
I think everybody does. I think that, and there'll be an opportunity for me to do that. I'm certainly going to do that with everybody. But I do want, I guess, when it comes down to, however you feel like you need to leave, whatever that case is, for me, I want to do the same thing. I want to be the last one here. I want it to be, late at night. I want nobody around. I want just like that space to be. I want to walk it multiple times and just be there in that spot. Because I do. I mean, I think about how many times. Well, here's the other thing. So I sent a couple of videos today, because one of the things that I do when I sign diplomas here is it takes me forever to sign diplomas, because this is the group that graduated yesterday. They came in with me, and they're like, I was their principal when they were in kindergarten, and they graduated yesterday. So I've been here for the whole thing, and that was awesome. So I was able to, like, when I signed diplomas, I just sit there and I remember the kids. And somebody asked me about it yesterday. They're like, how was it for you today? And I said, it was interesting to me because it was one of the first times that when they show at our graduation, they show like baby pictures, of the graduate as they're coming across stage. And as I was looking at the pictures, I'm like, I remember that. There are a lot of the pictures like, I remember that. I remember when that was taken. I remember what that kid looked like at that time. And it was really cool. It was really cool. So I spent a lot of time just thinking about the impact that they had. One of the things that was really cool yesterday, though, Jimmy, is exactly what you're talking about. The high school principal here, Brad Stratsky, who is the new superintendent starting in July, he's going to be phenomenal, is he did exactly what you said. And that was, if you at any point taught these kids, any point, whatever grade, at any point, if you taught these kids on stage, please stand up and be recognized, because I want you. And it was just as much for the people being recognized as it was for the kids to look out and see all these people that had supported them for all these years. And that was cool, because there was a lot of people standing, right? There was a lot of people standing. So, I mean, it was a really neat thing to be part of that conversation too. So I think one of the things that's really important as we kind of close a year, close a career, close a job, whatever the case may be, it still comes back to, are you taking the time to make the connections? And that's exactly what you're saying. Are we going to allow them to make the connection? Are we going to allow them to be are we going to be vulnerable enough to go and have that conversation with people, even though we don't want to, because we don't want them to feel like they have to, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So I think, we got a couple things that will hopefully help that process out. But what I want as I walk out, as I think about the last 3 weeks and the people that we serve here, I just want them to know how important the connection is as everybody leaves here. One of the things I say to our staff on the last day is, like, I understand you want to clean your stuff out and get out. I get that. And you earned that, but don't walk past the conversation with a colleague just to get out the door, because this group of people right here, this group that's sitting with us right now, this group will never all be here again. This is it. You've gone through a lot, but this group will be different. Even if it's a couple people who are different next year, the group that we are sitting here with today will never, it'll never be like that again. So don't walk past conversations with your staff members, with your colleagues, because you want to get out. And I understand that you want to get, like I said, you earn that. So, one of the things I think is probably, as we kind of, veer it towards what we can do to help, is that it doesn't always have to be about the last day, right? Like, you got 3 weeks until, your colleagues are going to take off. What are you doing for those 3 weeks to have an extra cup of coffee with somebody, or an extra conversation with somebody, or, or a kid, with a kid, or, taking a walk, whatever it is, don't leave it to the last week, because if you leave it to the last week, everything just jumps on top of each other, and then you miss one, then you miss something. There's no reason why you couldn't be doing it right now.
Yeah. And exactly point. It's funny you were talking about that signing of the diplomas, right? And that's a nice reminder. And I think we see more and more of that today than we ever have. It's like when you were a kid, right? You'd get a certificate or you'd get something, and you could tell it was just like a stamp, right? And I know people do that still. They have stamps because it saves time, and sometimes how even the secretary stamps everything. But when you talk about connections, to me, it's about how do you know every kid's name in your school? And one of the best ways to do that we know is obviously attending events, looking at programs, trying to look at those programs over and over while you're at the event to make sure you recognize who every kid is there. Well, signing diplomas and certificates and everything else that they're doing is a great way also, right? Because it helps you see who's everybody who's in band, who's everybody who's in choir, who's everybody that's in student council, whatever that is. It's an opportunity to do that. And so I even remember just looking at even like data on kids that are, who are in special needs, or maybe kids who, were struggling in school, and looking at that data as well, because part of it is learning the names of the kids. And again, it's a reminder, it's not only learning their names, but it's being intentional to understand the stories behind the names, how to spell the names, how to pronounce the names. I mean, all those things play a part. And I know sometimes we get caught up like, well, I have so many kids, I don't know how I can learn all their names. I'm like, well, you don't have to learn them all. You just have to learn more today than you did yesterday, right? We can all learn 2 or 3 names today, right? Just by being intentional doing that. And, it just keeps going back to connections over and over. And I love what you just said, right? It is the last time this group is all going to be together in this, with this, that looks like this. It's a good reminder for our teachers. It's the last time that class is going to be all together too, right? And so to me, it's one thing, I guess what I'm reflecting on is, as difficult it is as it is for us as adults on what those final days or whatever that looks like, imagine how difficult that is for a kid. We have the emotional intelligence maybe to understand it, to try to navigate it, to at least be able to analyze and comprehend it and put it in perspective, maybe even because we have experience. But a lot of kids don't have that. And especially as they go younger and younger and younger, leaving elementary school is tough. Leaving middle school is tough. That's scary too, right? So there's all these transitions. And so I think, to me, the part of the connection, taking it back to what your question was as leaders, as staff, how are we being intentional as kids transition into our school? And we see this a lot, right? For me, and I know other schools do this. I didn't start it. I remember learning from another school, and we just kept trying to replicate that, as well as, we would start the first day of school. I remember doing our first half day only with freshmen, and then it became a full day only with freshmen. And, it's this whole idea of the transition of getting the upperclassmen in to support that transition, right? To say to the kids, hey, we've been here. This is a great place to be. And then letting the kids connect with other kids rather than just the adults managing all the transition to a new school, handbooks, rules, whatever. And we see this also as what do those first days look like? Not just the last days. Yeah. And you're exactly right. And it's everything in between. And that's why when you talk about every moment matters, every day matters, every experience matters, is because I do think sometimes we look at only this or we look at this, when it's comprehensively, it's all of it, right? It's all of it. And so it's like when someone says, Jimmy, I'm really struggling with this student. And I say, yeah, but if you reframe it, you're so hard on yourself because you care so much, but you are 22 days into a school year and you're frustrated with a kid. You got to see that differently. You have 180 days. So you got you still got 158 to go, right? What are we going to do with 158? It's not where they start, it's where they end, right? And not only that, as we always say to teachers, they get frustrated with kids, or principals, they get frustrated with teachers or kids as well. It's, hey, listen, you have to understand that your job is to not quit on that kid. And so that means at the end of the year, you still haven't, you're not at the point that you wanted to be. Well, the fact that you didn't quit, that allows you to hand it off to the next adult. And if we reframe it and see it differently, it's maybe the kid just isn't ready yet. But because you didn't quit, the next teacher is going to get a better transition and maybe be able to finally have that breakthrough that the kid is now ready. But if you quit on that kid, then the next adult who says, I care about you, buddy, he's going to say, really? That's what my last teacher said. And they quit on me, right? And so to me, that's still always that connection. And so how are we doing that together as an entire staff and supporting one another, because, we know how challenging it is to teach and lead. And so, again, it still always goes back to that connection. And part of that is the trust factor too, right? It's that trust.
I think the majority of it is, it's how do you build it? And I think everybody talks about wanting trust, but nobody really talks about like how you building trust. And there's a difference between the two, in that everybody, it's like, everybody wants, right? Like I want to I want to be rich, or I want to be healthy, or I want to do this. But what's the work that you do to get yourself in that situation? And the trust piece for us, honestly, it came down here. It was really interesting to me that the trust piece in this building from when we started, honestly, just came in developing a culture of storytellers. It really did, because what we found out with trust was that when people, when you know that your story has value, you're willing to talk about that story. If you don't feel like your story has value, you're not going to talk about it, which means you never get to know people, which means it's harder to trust people that you don't get to know. So we broke it down to the fact that how are we making sure that we have opportunities to know everybody's story and connect on everybody's story and be willing to talk about that story, so you can develop a trust with the people around you. And for some, it became really easy. And for some, it's still hard today. And that's okay. It's okay. But if we're talking about the impact of these interactions and creating these moments, then the stories are easier to take place. And the thing that you were talking about when it comes down to, if you get to the point where you're quitting on a kid, or you feel like you're quitting on a kid, or somebody feels like you quit on a kid, the thing that we have to understand is that you're really not just quitting on that kid, you're quitting on your colleague too. And that's a big deal, right? Because now the colleague's going to have a tougher time, moving forward. And that's not fair to them. Just like you wouldn't want that done to you. You don't want to make sure that you don't want to do that to somebody else. And that's not about content. I'm serious. I'm sorry. It's just not. It's about the connections and making sure that people feel like they're valued in the space. And I know that some people in this space feel more valued than others. I understand that. I absolutely do. And we try to do everything we can. But even, and maybe with somebody else sitting in this chair, they'll feel more comfortable with that too. I mean, who knows? Everybody's not, I might not be for everybody. The next person might not be for everybody. You just don't know. You just do the best that you can to make as many connections as you can and kind of move forward from there. And so if we can always think about it that way, if we think about the fact that we're building trust with all these stories and all these connections, but every time that we do that, we're helping our colleagues out, because we want to make sure that we're not going to quit on anybody, just like we don't want them to quit on anybody, because it impacts our relationship and stories and everything goes along with it. So everything that we talk about, Jimmy, always comes back to connections and relationships. But I hope that people who listen to this know that it's not, that's like the low hanging fruit. Of course, that's the answer. The question becomes, how do you do it? And sometimes it's, are you vulnerable enough to have these conversations with them about creating, telling people your story? Are you willing as the leader to back off on the content that should be taught so everybody feels like they can make the connection? Are you willing as the leader to model what it looks like, to make sure that you're not driving content and really concentrating on connection, which means what are you doing in the last 3 weeks as the leader in the space to maybe pull back on meetings or pull back on expectations when it comes to all the logistical stuff, because that these people are going to have to make connections with kids as they're walking out the door. Are you as the leader setting up the opportunities for them to sit and talk and connect on what they learned throughout the course of the year? So, our last day here with staff is a street fair where they get a chance to just sit and talk with their colleagues about what they learned. That's a connection to the content that they taught throughout the course of the year, but more importantly, to how they felt about what they did and how they grew. And now think about every time we have that street fair, something pops out of it where another connection is made between colleagues at way different levels. A kindergarten teacher connecting with a high school English teacher or a high school science teacher or whatever, because of what they heard in that conversation during the street fair. Are we as leaders providing the opportunity to make the connections for staff so we don't have to, so it doesn't end up being on the last day, oh, don't forget to make a connection on your way out. So, if I'm talking to everybody about making sure that you make connections with kids over the course of the last 3 weeks, I want to make sure that as leaders in the space, you're providing that opportunity for them to do that, which means what are your expectations of them during the last 3 weeks so they can make the connections with kids and colleagues as they walk out.
Yeah, I like that, right? Because it's not only just what are we doing to make connections. The power of that is when you do that intentionally, the benefit of that is immediate right in the moment, but you're also modeling for them to do it with other people. And so then it multiplies that. And so the intentionality of that, because you said it's the how, right? Like we all want the trust, right? We all want the connection. Right. It's the low hanging fruit, but the how is, well, how do you do that? And we know that there is a lot about intentionality. It's like anything else. I have to be really intentional, because if I'm intentional, that means I'm investing time to make that happen. And so as we talked about before, that means we're dependable. That means we're inviting people to the conversation. We're inviting, it's inclusivity, right? It's consistency. It's apologetic at times. It's all these things. It's the circle back. That's what, again, circle back to me is a powerful culture builder, because it says you cared enough to come back to check on me, to see how I was doing. And so, all these different things. And you also said this idea about, the connections and the trust, because think about in our job as leaders, how often do we have to go address a student or a colleague or a staff member who is not meeting our expectations? If you have not developed that trust, if you have not developed that relationship, that's going to be a harder conversation. We know that. So it just intersects through everything. And then I was thinking this week, I had a chance, Joe, to watch Weston Kieschnick present. God, that guy has a gift, right? That guy has a gift. And of course, I'm proud because he's a Bettendorf High School grad, so that makes me more.
I didn't know that.
Kid. Oh yeah, Weston's a Bettendorf grad. And so it's funny because as I was coming in 2002, he's the graduating class of 2002. So I never had him as a student, but ironically, I meet him, I don't know what it was, 8-9 years later, when I get hired by ICLE, and he's already working for ICLE. And I meet this young guy and I watch him present. I start talking to him. And then he says he's from Iowa. I said, from where? He says, from Bettendorf. I'm like, what? Find out he's a Bettendorf grad. Yeah. And so we sat there at the bar for like 2 hours, and he just wanted to know, right? That funny. Like just wanted all that information. You know why? Connections. That's why.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Here he is 9 years later, still talking about all the teachers that made an impact on him. And that it's what we know, right? It's the same thing. But during his presentation, he was talking about these connections, and it reminded me because I saw Frank's comment in here about Rita and Oprah, and this idea of connections. The one thing we also have to remember, it's also inspirational. It's inspirational in the way that when you think about Oprah Winfrey, right? He mentions that. Who was Oprah Winfrey's greatest connection? Who was Oprah Winfrey's mentor? Who did she look up to? Who did she want to be like? And at the end, Maya Angelou. And so these connections are also important, and they matter because these people, their lives and paths cross. It's just like yesterday. I'm in El Paso, Texas. So Josh asked me, no, Josh, I'm in Chicago now, but I was there yesterday. And I'm there, and Joe, that was a special conference for me. Obviously, I love talking. It doesn't matter where I go. It doesn't matter who the audience is. It doesn't matter if I'm in a gym, a commons area, a cafeteria, an auditorium, or a beautiful convention center. It's all the same to me, right? And I'm in there just watching these people, and I'm watching as they enter this conference center. And it's a Saturday morning. The energy and just immediately, and I don't know if it's just something in our culture or something, but like everybody hugs everybody. Like as soon as they walk in, it's like the line after a wedding where everybody's shaking hands. Right. But in this conference that is all Latinos, right? Because it's TALAS, right? It's the Latinos administrators. And so everybody's hugging, like they will not stop hugging. And so it's the three things we know. There's a bazillion tons of food. There's also the music. It's mariachi bands galore. It's energy. It's hugs. It's connections. And it's just like, I don't even belong there because I'm not from that community, but they all are, obviously.
Right.
But man, did they make me feel welcome. Right.
Awesome.
Like, it's just like everybody's hugging me. I'm like, who are these people?
Right.
Okay. And so like everybody wants their picture. Everybody wants to connect. Everybody wants to talk to you. And I think it was genuine. It wasn't like, oh, we just got to talk. No. it's just, and so my point is they were so intentional about it, is that they made me feel connected. And
Right.
so it's just a reminder again, right, that we all play a role in that. And so how are we being intentional to make people feel like they belong, right?
Right.
So it's gonna-
Wherever you are within the context
Wherever you are,
of
right.
here. And wherever, and I think if we can continue to think about, you know, being present, being there, be in the moment with them, regardless if it's for 15 seconds, 15 minutes, or 15 hours, whatever the case may be. If we're in there and they know, I have a professor, well, Nancy Blair, you know Nancy Blair. So Nancy
Yeah, yeah.
Blair, and so we've talked about this before, that whole concept of, you know, when you're with somebody, do they believe that they are the center of your universe in that moment? And I think if we treat every interaction like that, I think, you know, that's where trust is built along the way. So you know, yesterday was just a really cool reminder of what that looked like. And when I was walking this morning and talking, it kind of struck me like, you know, regardless if people are at the beginning of their journey, at the end of their journey, they just want people with them on that journey. From waving as a kindergartner on a stage to waving, getting your baccalaureate degree in a commencement speech, you know, at a commencement, you know, at the university. It's the same thing. They want the same thing. And I think we all do. I think we all do. We all want that connection. And so if we can help, you know, please let us know. But the more that we can do to make connections and model what that looks like, the better we're all going to be. So, Jimmy, I'm going to let you go today. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. Final words? You got any final words?
Yeah, Joe, thank you. Those, you're absolutely right. So thank you so much for that. Enjoy your last few days as superintendent, and, you know, just remember that. And for everybody out there this is a wonderful time of the year. The amount of graduations and parties and celebrations is just awesome. And you deserve it. All of you deserve it. And just make sure you just enjoy every moment of it. So God bless everybody. Thank you so much for being a part of our show. We hope you join us again next week on the Weekly Show with Jimmy and Joe. If you're haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, we'd love for you to do that. We'd love to have you invite somebody else or share it with somebody else. And remember, we are downloading all of our episodes, over 40 episodes now, onto podcast, your favorite podcast platform. So we'll continue to add those, and obviously right now, but we're going back in the archives and doing those as well. So God bless everybody. Make it a great week. And until next time, be the change. See you, Joe Sanfilippo.